say morning.
You want to say good morning?
Morning.
Morning, everyone.
Morning, everyone.
All right, say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good morning, everyone. I will never forget my first day of design school. One of my teachers, who I love and adore, said, whatever you do, don't do matchy-matchy. And that went for furniture sets, it went for prints, for patterns. And I went down this whole road of trying to figure out how to successfully mix, right? I was definitely afraid of the matchy-matchy. And so I came to find out that mixing prints and patterns in particular, there's quite a science to it. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how to successfully mix prints and patterns. There's a theory that you just throw it all together and it'll stick. But I think there's more of a science to it. I think there's a way to dip your toe in lightly if you're a little bit scared about mixing prints and patterns, and then there's a way to go absolutely ham. But pro tip, no matter what you do, follow your instincts. If you think it looks bad, it probably does. So without further ado, here are my 3 tips for mixing patterns and prints. Number 1, for the newbies. If you're new to prints and patterns, you're feeling a little bit nervous, right out of the gate, all I recommend is to limit the amount of colors and prints to about 3 or 4 per room as a start. I generally don't like to do more than like 5 or 6, but once you get the hang of it, you can add a little bit more. But you should always make sure you have a solid texture to be able to rest the eye. The easiest way to mix prints right now is just the same type. So polka dot, or maybe a stripe with a stripe in different colors. Tip number 2, and this is going intermediate. It doesn't matter if it's a geometric or a floral or a stripe or dogs, just mix the scale of the pattern. That's what's important. If they're the same size, they'll compete against each other and then the eye actually won't know what to look at. So as I said before, you want your eye to gracefully travel around the room. So that solid is going to give it a break, and those differential and size is going to give it a break. Number 3, for those that want to get advanced, here's where our color theory comes in handy. As long as we stick to a consistent color scheme or palette, it's going to work. So keep the base color the same. And remember, that can be complementary, analogous, monochromatic. You can mix all the patterns. So it doesn't matter what the pattern is, it's really all about the colors and how the colors match. All right, to recap. We have limited the number of prints and patterns. We are making sure we have different scales and that you stick to a consistent color scheme. But what do I mean? All right, let's time out for a second. If you haven't watched my previous episodes of color, I'm gonna urge you to, and here's why. I'm gonna use 3 examples of scheming around a complementary color scheme using blue, yellow, and red. You will see that all 3 are extremely different, not only in their style, but inherently in their tones of color, their chromatic values, and how saturated we went with certain colors, prints, and patterns, mixing them all together. All right, so let's chitty chat. This particular client wanted their living room to be sort of neutral because that was the space everybody was going to be in most of the time, but they wanted it crazy fun. So how do we do that? We mixed the values of color to create depth and dimension, as well as the scales of the pattern. We have a base color of blue that we brought down to saturation to read really gray as our neutral base. We did the same thing with the rug that has a slightly higher chromatic value, and it was ombre, so it had the feeling of motion, but it wasn't a solid. We did an overscale wallpaper from Fornasetti, very architectural with monkeys. That was white and black, almost to read as a neutral. And an even larger oversized scale floral pattern on the curtains from Designers Guild that had a lot of negative space to keep it light, but it actually had the brightest colors of the room, which we wanted to keep in one space to be able to keep balance from the rest of the space. Mind you, these are 11 feet long curtains, so we wanted to make sure that your eye went to the end of the room, and then we had pops of pattern around the rest to be able to keep that flow. The pillows we kept quite solid. We actually pulled the colors from the curtains, but made them white, saturated. The yellows were almost gold. The reds were almost oxblood. We wanted them to be softer, but to continue the conversation. So in contrast to overt patterns and prints, this client didn't want to tip the scales in terms of going overboard with pattern, but I really wanted to. So how do we do that so we both get what we want? Blue again was our base. The walls actually, it's hard to tell, but they have a slight striated pattern to the wallpaper. So it was very, very neutral. I wanted the bulk of the pattern to be on the rug. So we went to this Marcel Wanders amazing rug where you walk on it and you discover something new every time. That was where the major pop of color was as well. I always like to complement pattern by mixing them around the room. So maybe they're not necessarily next to or on top of each other, but they're still dispersed throughout the space so your eye can travel. Allows you to keep that momentum going. But I'd argue actually that the space is still neutral and glamorous. I use a simple pattern on these ottomans from Kelly Wearstler, which are very neutral, almost yellow. And then I chose a very simple blue pattern on the pillows on these burgundy velvet chairs, which are a very balanced, warm, saturated red, which allows your eye to take that breather alongside the sofa, which we did in a very hairy mohair. The drapes actually also are not a solid, they are a silk that actually has a natural striation to them. So even though every piece in here has pattern or texture, we kept it very balanced on the same chromatic values. So everything's sort of read evenly and neutral. In this girl's room, the base is still blue, but I did a graphic graffiti-like wallpaper where the blue almost reads very gray. And I wanted to bring pattern or texture in almost every area of the room. So I cued from the wallpaper itself, used pink bedding that I felt had a little bit more purple in value, but definitely mixed with the pattern scale there. And put it on a very different value of pink on the tufted headboard, creating even more pattern on this solid texture. So everything had a little bit of movement, a little bit of texture, and a lot of color, but not super overwhelming. Man, I really do love blue. I hope you enjoyed this little lesson. I would love, love, love to see what you guys do with mixing prints and patterns. So if this inspires you to go bold or to start dipping your toe in, send me some snapshots. I'd love to see. Later, skaters.